What's going on, everybody? Welcome to No Timeouts, a football show coming at you from the Score Studio. My name is Jonah Birnbaum. That is Dan Wilkins. That is Tyler MacKillop. That is Justin Boone. You know them. You love them. Boys, we did it.
Let's go.
Football's back. Sing it from the freaking rooftops like the Beatles in '69. T, I know you're only 26. The Beatles were a highly influential British band that kind of shaped the landscape of modern rock and roll. Anyways, week one is here at long last, but it's not too late for us to make some educated guesses about how this season is going to shake out. So before we went on air today, I asked you guys to pull out your crystal balls, make some predictions about who is going to win the league's major awards in 2024. I wrote them down here, and I gotta say, they range from obvious to intriguing to, at least in one case, completely insane. But let's dive into them. Without further ado, let's take a look at who you guys think are going to take home the NFL's major hardware in 2024. Let's start off with a bang. For the league's most prestigious individual award, MVP, let's take a look who we got. Wilkins, you predicted Josh Allen of the Buffalo Bills. T, you had Trevor Lawrence of the Jacksonville Jaguars. And Boone, you had Patrick Mahomes of the Kansas City Chiefs. So first off, Boone, I respect the fact that you came to your senses and revised your bold prediction from a week ago, Dak Prescott winning MVP.
There's a much bigger difference between a bold prediction and
For sure.
actually who you think is going to win.
I appreciate that you got the sensible choice on record before the season started, and I don't think you need to make the case there. He's Patrick Mahomes. He's building a case to be the greatest quarterback of all time. And T, we already knew that you were very high on Trevor Lawrence. You previously predicted he would lead the league in passing yards. This MVP pick feels like a bold but logical extension of that. But Wilkie, I want to hear your thoughts on Josh Allen, because there's no question he's obviously one of the top quarterbacks in the game, but he's coming off a down season by his lofty standard. He didn't make the Pro Bowl. He threw a career-high 18 interceptions, and his supporting cast in the passing game isn't what it was. Stephon Diggs is gone. Gabe Davis is gone. You know, his number 2 wide receiver this year is a rookie who wasn't among the first wide receivers off the board in the 2024 draft. So tell me, what gives you optimism that Josh Allen is going to be MVP this year?
Yeah, look, just in terms of the quality of the player, I think you could make a logical argument for Josh Allen any year. Yeah. But this year specifically, I'm just kind of focusing in on the name of the award, the most valuable player, and I think a lot of voters tend to focus in on that as well. Look, I hate to say it, but the Bills roster is much worse year over year. Yeah. The secondary is a bit of a mess. The defense took another hit when they lost Matt Milano, and the receiver room is what it is. I mean, Keon Coleman didn't crack the top 3 in their official depth chart. I don't know officially what that means yet, but we might be looking at significant roles for Mac Hollins and Curtis Samuel alongside Khalil Shakir. So either way that room shakes out, as you said, it's not that inspiring. Having said all of that, you look at the betting odds, the market still sees this as like a 3-team toss-up for the AFC East. Mm-hmm. The only reason that you still consider the Bills on the same level as the Dolphins and the Jets is because they have one of the few quarterbacks in the league who can take a team on his back and quite literally drag them to win after win. So I think if the Bills are going to be in the playoffs, we're going to get like a 2015 Cam Newton type season out of Josh Allen. And at this point, with the player he's become, I'm not only not ruling it out, I'm kind of expecting it.
I think that's something that we have to remember with all these awards, is you almost need to like tell yourself a story, right? Like, what's the narrative going to be?
Yeah.
And I think it's pretty simple with the Bills, right? If they make the playoffs, if they win the division, which as a Bills fan, I will say right now, I did not predict them to do either of those things when we put out our score predictions this week for the season. But if they do, absolutely, Josh Allen has the case right there, right? It's going to be all him if they end up getting in.
I like the idea of you insulating yourself against heartbreak by not predicting the Bills to have a good season. It's a time-tested method, and I do it myself all the time outside of the context of football.
Wilkins kind of does it for both of us. He says the Chargers are going to be a playoff team. He thinks Josh Allen's winning MVP. Look, he's Mr. Optimistic.
I've appointed myself the captain of morale around here.
Yeah,
so
there you
I'm
go.
Just raising
I like
spirits.
it.
The Raiders fan.
We're indebted to you, brother. Let's move on. Let's talk about Offensive Player of the Year. So, Wilkins, you had Garrett Wilson of the New York Jets. T, you had Breece Hall of the New York Jets. And Boone, you had CeeDee Lamb of the Dallas Cowboys. I am not surprised that there were 2 New York Jets represented here, given how bullish we've generally been about that team for this season, nor am I surprised that CeeDee Lamb is here. He had 135 receptions last year, and he finished 3rd in Offensive Player of the Year voting. But T, of the 2 Jets here, I'm drawn to your Breece Hall pick, primarily because I used my first-round pick in my fantasy draft last night on Breece Hall.
Nice, I love
So
that.
tell me, dude, why is Breece Hall going to be the Offensive Player of the Year?
I think that the formula here is very simple. This is a guy that I think is a candidate to lead the league in touchdowns because this red zone offense was terrible. The last 8 weeks of the year, they scored touchdowns on less than 30% of their red zone trips. They get Aaron Rodgers, who is obviously going to help them in that area of the fields, and this offense will be more prolific as it is. So I think this is a candidate to score 20 touchdowns. This is a guy who posted, 70-plus receptions last year. I think he's still in line to do something along those lines because you look at the other options outside of Garrett Wilson, and they're Mike Williams coming back from a torn ACL. They're Tyler Conklin, who's been around the league and can help this offense, but doesn't really have a high ceiling. So I think there's a good formula here for Hall to potentially reach 2,000 all-purpose yards, and I definitely think get close to 20 touchdowns. He's a guy I think will lead the league in touchdowns, so I think the formula is just perfect for this guy to be the Offensive Player of the Year.
Yeah, I totally dig it. I mean, he was 4th in yards from scrimmage last year, and that was with, obviously,
Horrendous offense.
deeply shoddy quarterback play and just an inept offense generally. So I'm here for that, and if he leads the league in touchdowns, I will definitely be among those
we're happy.
most thrilled. Okay, let's move on to Defensive Player of the Year. Wilkie, you had Quinnen Williams of the New York Jets. T, you had Aiden Hutchinson of the Detroit Lions. Boone, you also had Hutchinson. I was worried that we would see a clean sweep here with 3 Hutchinson predictions because, I mean, he's such an animal, and he only got better last year in his second season in the NFL. But Wilkie, you zagged, man. Williams was a menace in 2022, 12 sacks, tied for 4th in the league in QB hits, and he finished 7th in Defensive Player of the Year voting, but he took a pretty sizable step backwards last year. What fills you with confidence that he can regain his 2022 form or, frankly, play at an even higher level in 2024?
Yeah, so he had 5.5 sacks last year, but sacks don't always tell the full story here. So you dig a little bit deeper into the numbers, you realize that he actually led the league in both pressures and pressure rate among defensive tackles. That's better than Chris Jones, better than Aaron Donald. That becomes even more incredible when you consider, as we just discussed, the state of the Jets' offense last year. They didn't exactly put them in a lot of situations where you're pinning your ears back and getting after the quarterback. Quinnen Williams had 435 pass rush reps last year. Only a quarter of those came with the Jets defending the lead. Probably not that surprising.
Yep.
But in those rare situations, he was actually the number 1 player across the league in pass rush pressure rate at 23.9%. Better than Micah Parsons, better than Myles Garrett. I think we're all aligned here as we see with the predictions that we're expecting the Jets to be a much better offense this year. That, in turn, puts the defense in better positions to get after the quarterback, more obvious pass rush situations. I think that this is setting the stage for guys like Quinnen Williams to become true household names. So I've got him at 15-plus sacks this year.
And if a D tackle does that.
Yeah, and to me, that production from a defensive tackle spot on the best defense in the league, and really the big thing here is a winning Jets team. Yeah. I think that sets the stage for him to be a top candidate for Defensive Player of the Year.
I will say, and this was last year, I had Myles Garrett. I bet on Myles Garrett to win Defensive Player of the Year, and a lot of it is similar to what you said, is a guy who consistently wins as a pass rusher, because that's what Garrett was. He led the league in pass rush win rate. That's why I like Hutchinson, because he was very high in that number 2, and just can only improve upon what they did last year. So if he gets into those situations, which we all expect the Jets to, a D tackle that puts up 15 sacks definitely deserves to win Defensive Player of the Year.
We are running the risk of increasing expectations a little too much here for a fan base that is used to getting let down. So I do apologize for that, but there is reason to be excited on both sides of the ball, and the predictions obviously reflect that.
Totally. Let's move on to Offensive Rookie of the Year. Wilkie, you had Caleb Williams of the Chicago Bears. Tyler, you had Jaden Daniels of the Washington Commanders. Boone, you also had Caleb Williams. Once again, I was sweating a possible sweep with all 3 of you taking the number 1 pick in this year's draft to win Offensive Rookie of the Year. But T, you went out on a limb and you took the number 2 pick in this year's NFL draft to win Rookie of the Year. Daniels is obviously an extremely exciting player. He just won the Heisman Trophy. He doesn't have the weapons around him that Williams does. Why is Daniels going to win Offensive Rookie of the Year?
I don't look at Offensive Rookie of the Year as I look at MVP, where MVP probably need to put together a winning season in order to win the award. With Daniels, I think it's just the opportunity to affect the game in multiple ways, where Williams is playing in a team where unlike his time at USC, this is a roster that I think is ready to compete and ready to win, and a defense that could be very well a top 5 unit in the league if they play at their peak. Daniels is going to be in a spot where this team, I think, defensively is still going to be poor. They're much better coached, for sure. I'm excited about the combo of him and Cliff Kingsbury. So I think it's for Daniels the ability to be an incredible downfield passer, as he's proved throughout college, and has a good connection here with Terry McLaurin to be able to help him to continue to do that in the NFL. But then an offensive line that's shaky, the opportunity to use his legs like he did in college as well. So this is a player that I think is in a spot, like we talked about Josh Allen, to just kind of carry his team and carry this offense, where Williams is in a really well-supported situation. They could still put up big numbers, and I think he has the good opportunity to do so. But I think Daniels is in a spot where he can really carry this team. And regardless of the record, could put the numbers together where it's hard not to give it to him. So
yeah, I think he's going to put up huge numbers, and I think a big part of it is an awful defense. Mm-hmm. It's just going to kind of all be on him. My one concern is I don't know how the rushing is going to translate to the next level. Of course, he's a dynamic runner. It's just he's so slender. Yeah. He is so not adverse to contact. He just runs right into it, which at his size he should not be doing. I just want him to take care of himself, and if he does, I think he'll be really effective.
We've seen other guys though, like Lamar Jackson, come in and take some big shots early.
Yeah.
Eventually, they do learn that they got to be. Well, maybe not Josh Allen. I don't know if he's learned yet because he still throws his body through the air.
Yeah.
But most guys learn that you shouldn't be doing that. So I'm not as concerned about that.
I think Josh Allen probably has about 60 pounds on Jaden Daniels, so it's a little bit different. And
Daniels did not learn in college. He would show up week after week.
Yeah,
and
he would just take one hit after another, and it does concern me. But like you said, you can learn that, and the coaches are going to be on him, as we saw live in a game this year in the preseason. Just either slide or get out of bounds. Take care of yourself, and if he can do that, he'll have a big year.
Before we move on to, I think this one is going to be really fun, and we obviously went for the quarterbacks. Yeah. But you have Marvin Harrison Jr., you have Malik Neighbors. Like, there's other guys that can certainly get in that conversation.
Yeah, definitely. Do the Commanders finish with a winning record this year?
I don't think so. The receiving core is underwhelming. The offensive line still a problem. The defense was really, really bad last year. I think Quinn will help them, but I don't think it'll be enough to be a winning record. Or
I think
to the playoffs.
I think they're going to be closer to the number 1 pick than they are a winning record. Sadly.
Hey, bold predictions was last week.
They were stacked. They were stacked.
I don't know if it's that bold.
They were stacked up front before the trades with Chase Young as well and Sweat, and I really love that from that perspective, because when I look at teams that can win games, I look at their front four, and now it's a little bit more underwhelming with the interior guys getting a little bit older and then the edge guys gone. That's a problem for me.
Very tough division too, so we'll see. Yeah. Let's move on to defensive rookie of the year. So Wilkie, you had Nate Wiggins. T, you had Jared Verse, and Boone, you had Leatu Latu. Each of these guys are interesting, but Boone, we just haven't heard from you yet. So tell me why Latu, the first defensive player off the board in the 2024 draft, is going to be the defensive rookie of the year.
I mean, that's the easiest case. He's the first guy off the board. He has the best odds right now to win it. But I think he's going to a situation where the Colts need a pass rush. He's going to be able to provide that. He's not like one of these freak athletes. He's more of like, kind of a hard nose, like whether it's instinctual, whether it's like a technician. He's a guy that's going to win as long as he can stay healthy. And again, if we're talking about like the story, I think the Colts are going to be much better. The Colts were the team that I actually picked to make the playoffs over the Bills this year. So I think that's sort of part of the situation too. The team overall doing better, that defense improving, and I think that's what's going to get them there.
Yeah, it was really hard to find a guy you like really genuinely liked, I found.
Yeah, I love the pick. He was my number 1 edge rusher in this draft over Dallas Turner and over Jared Verse. Just technique-wise, I think he's very advanced. He has a deep bag of pass rush moves. I think that's going to lend itself to immediate production. And like we've talked about a lot, I think the Colts are going to score a lot. That's going to offer a lot of pass rush situations, and he's their number 1 edge rusher right now. I think he could have a big year.
And we've seen guys win this award. It's not so much like Defensive Player of the Year. We've seen guys win this award with like 7 sacks, right? Like it's not like he needs a 15 kind of number.
It's all opportunity, and I think the 3 guys we all listed here are going to get opportunity right off the hop. So. Yeah.
I'm surprised we didn't see Dallas Turner show up in any of your predictions coming off the season he had with Alabama, but we'll see. Let's move on to comeback player of the year. Wilkie, you had Aaron Rodgers. Tyler, you had J.K. Dobbins. And Boone, you had Kirk Cousins. So, okay, there's no surprise to see 2 veteran Pro Bowl quarterbacks coming off serious injuries pop up on this list. Actually, each of the last 6 comeback players of the year have been quarterbacks. T, your pick is out there, dude.
Agreed.
Did I just convince you that the Chargers might be good? Is that what's going on here?
Well, to me, I've been a guy who's been very pessimistic when it comes to J.K. Dobbins and his injuries and coming back from those injuries and being able to play. Him coming back from, I believe it was the ACL tear, and being able to come back as quickly as he did. And he also played extremely well. He's been extremely efficient in obviously what's been very seldomly available games throughout his career. We're talking averaging over 5 yards a carry in his career and not playing anywhere near 100%. I don't know if you guys, I think it was the Texans game last year or maybe it was the year prior where he's legitimately broke a 70-yard touchdown run and you can see him hobbling as he runs down the field. This is an opportunity. We know Greg Roman. We know his offense. So he's very familiar in that offense as well, in that they're going to run the football. They have a fantastic offensive line with a lot of talent, and they don't have a lot of skill at the pass catcher spots. They might be the worst team in the league at that area, quite frankly. So this is a team that will ride the run game, and Dobbins has just continued to prove people wrong coming back from injury. So if he gets the ball enough, which if he's healthy, he definitely will, could have a very big year and find the end zone enough too, because Gus Edwards is just, in my opinion, as replaceable level of a running back as there is in the league. So if Dobbins is available and anywhere near his former self, he should win that running back room and potentially have a big year. The obvious Kirk and Rodgers are the obvious picks for sure.
Yeah,
No
I respect the boldness of that one, but I mean, coming back from an Achilles this
know.
year, like we just have never seen it happen, right? Like, and just because a guy gets back in the field, I try to remind everyone this with like Cam Akers a couple years ago, you can get back in 5-6 months and it's incredible, but are you yourself? Are you that player that you were? Are you regaining your form? You just haven't seen anybody do it. It takes guys often 2 years, and some running backs never get it back, right? So that's my concern on top of the fact that, he's just had so many injuries in his career. And, oh, man, what a prospect coming out. Like, the guy could have been so good. I got a lot of concerns, and I'm going to talk about a Chargers back that's a little further down the depth chart later when we get to the fantasy section, who I'm stashing because Gus Edwards and Dobbins have some durability concerns.
Yeah, and I think it's worth pointing out, too, a running back hasn't won this award in 20 years. And I think that's a testament to when running backs go down, it's very hard for them
100%.
to reclaim their previous form. But who knows? Maybe you could enter that exclusive club with Willis McGahee. We'll find out.
Jim Harbaugh could do it. Harbaugh could do that.
Let's move on to our last major award to go over. So that's Coach of the Year. Wilkie, you had Jim Harbaugh of the Los Angeles Chargers. Tyler, you had Mike McDonald of the Seattle Seahawks. And Boone, you had DeMeco Ryans of the Houston Texans. I get the allure of picking a newly hired head coach in his first season with a team. Both Harbaugh and McDonald meet that description. But Boone, I got to say, I'm intrigued by your pick because it felt like last year was Ryans' year. He turned a 3-win team into a playoff team in his first season in Houston. They won a playoff game for the first time since 2019. And Ryans just missed out on Coach of the Year by the narrowest of margins last year. What could Ryans possibly do as an encore in 2024 after that incredible season the Texans had last year that could get him over the hump and make him Coach of the Year?
We talked about the Texans in recent weeks, right? And the moves that they made. They didn't just rest on their laurels. They went out and added more players. And I love the moves that they made in the offseason. I don't want to go through it all again. You know, the Stephon Diggs, some of the guys on defense they brought in, they're continuing to improve. And I think generally people are looking at them now as a potential Super Bowl contender. Yeah. It's not just playoffs anymore. So again, I think this would be maybe a little bit making up for the mistake last year where I think he should have won it last year. And the narrowest of margins, it was actually a tie, and it was the amount of first place votes that gave it to Kevin Stefanski, right? So I think this year they're going to make up for that. And I think the Texans are one of the best teams in the league right now. And that's why I think Ryans is going to get acknowledged. One of the best young coaches in the league. He deserves it.
Yeah, absolutely. Justice for DeMeco Ryans in 2024. Great stuff, fellas. On that note, it's time to bring in our virtual homie, the Score's lead NFL reporter, Josh Tolentino. JT, what's happening, brother?
Hey, guys. Pleasure to join you, as always, and happy to get some real football here starting tonight, and then obviously the Eagles and Packers down in Brazil tomorrow. Happy week 1, fellas. We have finally made it.
Yeah,
we made it, dude.
Listen, if you do not say something about the jacket he has on right now,
it's a power jacket. That's a week 1 jacket, man.
Hey, gotta come into week 1 with style, but happy to chop up all the hottest headlines here heading into week 1.
Definitely, dude. And there's a whole bunch of major stories that we want your perspective on. First off, there's only one player in the entire NFL who's still holding out, Josh. That's edge rusher Hassan Reddick of the New York Jets. What's the latest on this interminable saga, man? And do you think he'll be in the lineup on Monday night against San Francisco?
Yeah, Jonah, just this morning, Jets coach Robert Saleh indicated that Hassan Reddick still not showing up into the building based on what I've been told by sources with the Jets. He has not stepped foot at the facility since April 1st, back when he was traded and had his introductory press conference. I think Saleh is a little too optimistic by saying, he is not ruling out Hassan Reddick for Monday. I mean, if you're Hassan Reddick at this point, you might as well. He lacks leverage. The Jets did give up a conditional third-round pick to acquire him, but outside of that, I mean, the leverage is all with the team. They've stuck firm on their positioning with this. They do not want to engage in contract extension talk with Reddick unless he shows up finally. So, I mean, if I'm Reddick, I think I wait out this process. He's already waited this long, and yeah, he's going to get fined about $900,000 on missing a game check, after already incurring about $2 million in fines. But let's see how this Jets defense performs. The coaches and executives there are very excited about this defense, but who knows? I mean, if it takes one guy to go out and then Reddick regains the leverage. So he wants to get paid, $25+ million. I think anywhere in that $20 million range is a good starting point for Hassan Reddick, and he might as well wait it out and see how this Jets defense does against these Niners this upcoming weekend.
Yeah, and let's remember, this is a veteran contract. This isn't a rookie contract where a team has the option to waive the fines when the player eventually does report. These fines are staying, so he's losing out on all that money. This is a crazy situation, too.
Yeah, it's nuts. And look, everyone remembers, in 1993, Emmitt Smith held out for the first 2 games of the season. The Cowboys went 0-2, and he got paid. So we'll see.
Tyler doesn't remember.
Well done. Well done. Absolutely. All right. Thanks, Josh. Moving on. One of the pieces of business that did get finalized in the days leading up to the season was Pat Surtain's record extension with the Denver Broncos. He's now the highest paid defensive back in the NFL. And Josh, I'm curious to hear what you think this means for the cornerback market moving forward.
Yeah, you saw this market a little bit stagnant over the past couple of years. Jair Alexander of the Packers, the previously highest paid cornerback at $21 million. That was back in May 2022. So we've gone 2 years without much movement. Meanwhile, we've seen the wide receiver market boom with all these guys getting paid $30+ million. And here we get Patrick Surtain resetting the market by more than $3 million. I think if I'm a cornerback, particularly Sauce Gardner, you get so excited when you see this number, because I think Sauce Gardner is going to aim for $25+ million when he's eligible to re-sign after this. Or re-sign a contract extension after this season. So in all terms, I mean, these guys are wanting to get paid. They deserve to get paid, especially when you see the wide receiver market boom. I'm paying attention to Sauce Gardner and what his number he's going to be seeking next offseason, that $25 million plus range. And also with Patrick Surtain, just to tie it up real quick, represented by Tory Dandy, who also represents Hassan Reddick. He's been busy. Also got that deal done with CD Lamb. So been very busy for Tory Dandy of CAA. And last note on Patrick Surtain, not only is he resetting the market, he's also accounting for less than 10% of the salary cap. So it gives the Broncos a little bit of flexibility as they continue to navigate that Russell Wilson dead cap situation here in future years.
Yeah, tidy piece of business and seemingly pretty mutually satisfactory. Okay, moving on, Josh. You had an extensive piece go up on The Score recently ranking all starting quarterbacks in the NFL, and coming in last place was Jacoby Brissett. 31-year-old Jacoby Brissett, the journeyman. He played all of 3 games last year, and he's going to start for the New England Patriots, even though it seems inevitable that this rebuilding New England team will, at some point, likely sooner than later, turn to Drake May, the 3rd overall pick in this year's draft. Why would the Patriots not start the season with May as their QB1?
Yeah, guys, I made several calls on this situation brewing in New England, and I was basically given 2 comparisons. So you look at last year's situation with the Carolina Panthers and Bryce Young. It was just horrific all around. I mean, Bryce Young ate up 62 sacks. He was one of the most pressured quarterbacks in the league. They do not want to put their top pick, Drake May, into that situation. The Patriots want to ease him into that starter role, despite, at times Drake May outperforming Jacoby Brissett this summer. And one other factor that went into this decision based on folks that I've spoken to across the league, folks specifically with the Eagles and the Colts who have experience in dealing with Jacoby Brissett on a daily basis. He really won over everyone at the Patriots facility with his approach, and just his personality shined through behind the scenes. And lastly, his familiarity with offensive coordinator Alex Van Pelt. A situation there that was another situation that was described similarly to me was the Miami Dolphins back when they drafted Tua, and they were still sticking with Ryan Fitzpatrick, mainly because of his familiarity with the OC at that time, Chan Gailey. And then we obviously saw the Dolphins make a switch midseason to Tua. A little bit different situation with him coming off that hip injury that he suffered at Alabama. But I would not be surprised if at some point things went south for the Patriots, which what many are predicting and expecting for them to make a midseason switch to Drake May to again ease him into this process of taking over as starter there a long time.
Yeah, for sure. And Josh, before we let you go, we've been making a lot of predictions here today. We figured we should let you make one as well. Lots of old faces in new places for 2024. Josh, who's one veteran who found a new team this offseason that you feel is most likely to succeed?
I wanted to go with Stephon Diggs just based on, he's going to be seeking another big payday this offseason. But I'm going to go with Saquon Barkley and this Eagles team. You look at, he can make a Christian McCaffrey type impact on this Eagles offense, as I discussed with Boone yesterday on his pod. But you just really like that situation. And yes, you're aware of the dysfunction and everything that the Eagles experienced last season and finishing 1-6. But Saquon Barkley, he's arguably never played with an offense this talented between the offensive line and their weapons on the outside, their tight end with Dallas Goedert. But I look at the offensive coordinator situation and Kellen Moore, who was in place before Saquon. Man, the pre-snap motion that he's going to implement to this team and how that can get Jalen Hurts back to his true dual threat self. I think Saquon Barkley in line for a very big year with this Eagles team. The Eagles themselves, they might fall short of expectations just considering how ugly everything looked last season. But I really love that Saquon addition. I think he's set to pop off.
Yeah, totally. Very, very foreseeable. Great stuff as always, JT. We'll let you go for now, my man, but enjoy week one. We'll look forward to chatting again soon. And please make sure to wear that jacket for all subsequent appearances on No Timeouts.
Hey, I've got to check the closet upstairs and see what's cooking in there for next week. But enjoy week one, fellas. Football's finally back.
All right, buddy. We'll see you next time. That rocked. Before I turn it over to you, Boone, fellas, we got to get our Super Bowl predictions on record before the season starts. Real quick. Wilkie, who you got?
This is going to be a little boring, but I got the Chiefs over the Lions. As much as I like the Texans and as much as we've been hyping up the Jets, I don't see anyone in the AFC knocking off the Chiefs. We talked last week about how good their offense is going to be, and I think the Lions are probably the second best team in football, so it's a fun matchup to me.
Yeah, if any other fans of the Lions or the Jets out there or anything like me, they're probably going to tell me, hey, shut up, don't talk about my team like this. But I actually think the Lions are going to beat the Jets in the Super Bowl. I'm really high on the Lions. I think they found all the answers, and I just think the Jets have the best roster in the AFC. But the Chiefs do have Patrick Mahomes, and their roster is pretty close, so I'm pretty interchangeable between the two.
Wow. Booney, who you got?
You guys were messaging me, I will say, like 2 minutes before Josh came on the Score Fantasy Football podcast yesterday. I had to go back and look. We did a predictions article at the Score this week. I had put my prediction in there, and I didn't even remember who I had picked, and I didn't want to screw it up. I had to go back and look at that doc. I have the exact same as Wilkins, sadly.
What?
I have the Chiefs over the Lions. Yeah, very boring.
No, I mean, three of you have the
Lions
going
so
to the Super
bad.
Bowl. They've never been to a Super Bowl. One of you has them winning it, which is crazy. And you know what? I would welcome that kind of shakeup in the NFC. Like over the last 7 Super Bowls, I think there's only been 4 teams represented. So I'm here for that.
It's a death wish. I'm sorry, Detroit.
It is a kiss of death, 100%. For my part, I have Kansas City, but I have them beating Dallas. All right, so that represents a bit of a shakeup in the NFC. But look, I know there's never been a three-peat in the Super Bowl era, but picking any team other than Kansas City just feels silly, if not contrarian. Patrick Mahomes is 15-3 in his postseason career. He's only lost to 2 quarterbacks, one of them being Tom Brady, and Tom Brady beat him for the first time when Patrick Mahomes was in his first season as a starter. He's building a case to be the greatest quarterback of all time, and he exudes the same kind of inevitability that Brady did. if not a stronger sense. I just don't see how you could bet against Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs. And I mean, it'd be cool to see a three-peat for the first time in the Super Bowl era. We'll see. With that, Booney, I'm going to turn it over to you for more of that hot, tasty fantasy content.
That awkward time when I get to leave the set and walk over to the screen.
It's our
All right.
favorite moment.
Let's do it, gentlemen. Okay, we've made the transition here. We have gone from the preseason content, going over what you should be doing in your drafts, to now the regular season lineup decisions. And we are taking my start, sit, stash, quit column that I have done for, I don't even know how many years, 6, 7 years, something like that. And we are going to do it as a video now. I'm going to run through my favorite starts, my favorite sits, a couple stashes, and then a couple guys that I think you should be quitting in standard regular leagues, one quarterback, one tight end. If it gets more specific than that, you can hit me up on Twitter at Justin Boone, and you can ask me those questions there. Now, let's begin with the starts this week. And the very first one is a guy we've already talked about on the show today, Jayden Daniels, going up against the Buccaneers. I've mentioned him on the show in the last few weeks as well. Somebody that I'm very excited about. I know he's a rookie, but you look at the overall profile, the guy has great rushing ability. The guy is also a pretty good deep ball thrower. I think they're going to take advantage of that. And this week, he's going against the Buccaneers, and the Buccaneers have notoriously been a pass funnel defense. Now, what that means is that they are very strong against the run. They have Vita Vea and those guys up front that are very stout stopping the run. So teams end up throwing against them, and they've lost a few guys in the offseason on that defense as well. So it's the fact that I really like Daniels as a player and as a prospect. I think he's going to be able to deliver most weeks, but going up against this Bucs defense that allowed the 7th most fantasy points to quarterbacks last year, and they allowed 6 rushing touchdowns to QBs. I really like Daniels this week. Shifting over to running back, my favorite start there, another guy that we've been talking about all offseason long, Kenneth Walker on the Seahawks. He gets the Broncos this week. All the talk during the offseason from the coaching staff has been that they are going to give Walker a ton of volume, that they like him as a 3-down back. And I think this matchup with the Broncos really favors him. Seahawks are going to be favored big in that game. I think there's going to be a lot of positive game script for him. And last year, the Broncos are one of the bottom 5 teams in terms of fantasy points allowed to running backs. So let's make sure you got Walker in your lineups. Now, the receiver that I'm going to recommend as a start is a little bit tricky because it's been changing throughout the week, right? It's T. Higgins on the Bengals, and the Jamar Chase situation has not been solved yet, but he was back at practice in the last few days, so it looks like he is going to be out there this week. Anything could happen over the next couple days here, but it really seems like Chase is going to play. Yet, he hasn't been practicing much before this. Higgins has been out there. Higgins is a guy that's in a contract year here. He wants to look as good as possible, and he's got that chemistry with Joe Burrow. And in games when Chase hasn't played, Higgins has been a wide receiver 1. So in a game where I don't think Chase is going to be 100% himself this week, they'll bring him in. They might ease him in a little bit, though. I think Higgins is going to have a great game in this one, and he bumps up from normally being maybe in the wide receiver 3 territory to more of a wide receiver 2. Now, let's go to tight end here. And the tight end this week, I'm going to pick one of the guys that's up at the top, a guy that I've been recommending that you should be drafting, Trey McBride on the Cardinals, and he's going up against my Bills this week. But here's the thing, Buffalo's defense, all the losses that they've had this offseason, whether it's the safety duo, and we're talking about trying to cover a tight end, the safety duo, Jordan Poyer, Micah Hyde, those guys are gone. And then Matt Milano, their best linebacker, and also their best coverage linebacker, he's out until December, maybe January. We'll see. Trey McBride last year down the stretch was a top 5 fantasy tight end. Kyler Murray loves throwing to him. He is going to have a great game, unfortunately, against my Bills this week, guys.
Boone, love the picks. You got to tell me, how much of Jayden Daniels being on the board here was about you ending up with him in our office league last night? Be honest.
Okay, in all honesty, I submitted these on Tuesday. I wanted to make sure that our graphics guys were able to make everything. So the draft was Wednesday night. I submitted them Tuesday, so it was like 1,000% correlated. I definitely love Jayden Daniels. I definitely want to see him have a great week 1 and a great season. He's on a bunch of my teams.
Okay, well, it was a lot of fun drafting right next to you all night and worrying that you're going to take all my guys. So thanks for that.
I think you stole more guys from me than I ended up stealing from you in that draft. But let's keep moving here. Let's go to the sits. And The first quarterback sit, this one breaks my heart because I've been talking him up. Jonah mentioned it earlier. Dak Prescott, my bold prediction for MVP. And yet week one, I am telling you, you probably want to sit Dak. There's probably better options that you can get. He's going up against this Browns defense, one of the best defenses in the league. So difficult for quarterbacks to go up against that Browns defense. Last year, they were bottom 5 in terms of fantasy points allowed to quarterbacks. They were also bottom 5 in completion percentage allowed. They were bottom 5 in touchdown passes allowed, and they were third in the third most interceptions last year. So this is a really, really tough matchup for Dak. He can still come through. He could still throw a couple touchdowns, but he's more down in that QB2 range this week, and that's why I'm guessing you could probably find somebody else to throw in your lineup this week that might be on the waiver wire, or maybe you took 2 quarterbacks, even though I don't normally recommend doing that. Now, the sit at running back, and it's a guy that we're going to go back to that Vita Vea Buccaneers defense and their run D. We're going to talk about Brian Robinson Jr., someone else who I've talked up as a great value in fantasy drafts, and yet this week, I hate the matchup for him. I think the Commanders' best chance here is going to be running the ball with Daniels, throwing the ball over the top. I don't think you're going to get that much out of Brian Robinson Jr. He's more of just a touchdown or bust guy this week, so he falls a little further. Most weeks, he's going to be in the RB2 ranks. This week, he's down in that RB3 flex range. For receivers that I think you should be sitting this week, Calvin Ridley. And I kind of am interested to see how they're going to use him. Brian Callahan has sort of suggested that he might try to make Ridley like the Jamar Chase in this offense. Remember, Brian Callahan coming over from the Bengals, did great work there. Is Ridley up to that? Probably not. But this week, I don't love the matchup. He's going against that Bears defense. Jalen Johnson, one of the best cornerbacks in the league. We don't know, especially this early in the season, whether they're going to shadow or anything like that. But I think this is a tough matchup. Seems like DeAndre Hopkins, even though he had that injury in the preseason, seems like he's going to be out there this week. So I don't think this is a spot where you want to start Ridley. In my mind, he's more of a wide receiver 4 flex option for you in your lineup. And I would hope that you have somebody else that you could throw in there. The tight end, and this is a funny one. I'm going to give you guys a little bit of insight on this. So I've been doing this article, like I said, for 6-7 years. Finding a sit at tight end is incredibly difficult, right? Because a guy can go out and get a touchdown, and that's essentially just going to bump him up into the low end tight end 1 ranks. And I have notoriously been picking guys 50% of the time or more that end up scoring that touchdown. They might not have great yardage. They might only have 30 yards, 35 yards, but they find the end zone once or twice, and then I get a bunch of messages from people going, why did you say to sit that guy? Well, it's hard to predict. Touchdowns are very volatile. But Njoku has a really bad matchup. The Cowboys allowed the 4th fewest fantasy points to tight ends last year. His best games last year came when Joe Flacco was out there. That doesn't mean that he can't have great performances with Deshaun Watson, but is Deshaun Watson 100% healthy? All that sort of stuff. Deshaun's missed time in the preseason. So I'm just shying away from Njoku and kind of treating him more as a high-end tight end 2 and that boomer bust kind of touchdown or not tight end option for fantasy this week, guys.
I think a lot of people, this is how I think about it, because when you're going through this, I'm just thinking about my team selfishly.
Of course.
I think there's a lot of questions of whether or not you invest in an offense like you talked about with Ridley, of the Titans could be a team that are going to throw the ball a whole lot more, and maybe you don't want to find out whether or not that's true this early in week 1. I got Ayuk and Ridley on my team, and I'm thinking, well, how much am I going to get from Ayuk from the fact he hasn't really been on the field and available in training camp? And he's got a tough matchup as well. So how would you handle maybe those 2 guys and who you'd want to play?
I'm still going to go with Ayuk. I've also been somebody that just loves Brandon Ayuk, so maybe I'm not the best person to pick here. Fair. He's higher in my rankings, though, this week. Talent-wise, a much better player. The offense, even though the matchup is difficult, that 49ers offense, they can come through against basically any defense on the other side of the field. So I'm going with Ayuk because it's not closer. Ridley is somebody that still, in my mind, needs to prove himself in this new destination. Yeah. And like you said, we need to see what this Titans offense is going to be, even though I do think it is going to be a lot better this year. But Ayuk, even though he maybe will play, let's say, even if he played 70, 80% of the snaps this week and they kind of rested him a little bit and had him on a pitch count, he's still a guy that can come through for fantasy. So unless we hear something about him barely being involved, which I highly doubt, you're going to want to lean towards the more talented player, and in my mind, that's definitely
I put Ayuk's on my bench right now. I will say I did that, but I think I might make the I think I might make the change because I do think Jalen Johnson's a great point too.
We can revisit it next week and we can see.
Yeah, exactly. That's the best part.
I'm not always right, but more often than not, if you follow what I'm saying, it's going to lead to good things. Now let's go to the stash section, and unlike the tight ends, where I was saying I've had bad luck, picking tight ends and then they end up scoring touchdowns. This stash section, one of the best things I've probably done over the last few seasons. People want me to turn it into like a full article where I'm giving them like 10 stashes. That might be a little bit harder to do, but essentially what the idea here is I'm finding players that are 10% rostered or less. Some little, odd time I'll go over by, a percentage or two, but normally it's 10% or less. Trying to find those guys that are available in most leagues that you can throw at the end of your bench that might have a good game this week, might get more opportunity in the coming weeks, but you're jumping ahead of your league mates. You're getting these players before you have to go bid on them or use your, waiver priority to try to get these guys on your team. So the two guys that I want to mention for this right now are two running backs. It's normally going to be running backs for this, guys, but the first one, Kamani Vidal, and this goes back to the Dobbins thing that we were talking about earlier. Gus Edwards, J.K. Dobbins, not great histories in terms of their durability. Are they going to be able to hold up all season? Dobbins, I worry that he's not going to be able to get back to what he was, even though you could argue, what was he ever in the NFL, because he's kind of always been hurt, but a great talent, but a guy that coming off an Achilles tear, I don't have a lot of faith that he's going to be able to have a great fantasy season. And Gus Edwards, somebody that's that north-south runner, doesn't give you much in the passing game, but again, a guy that's had a lot of injuries in his career. So you look deeper here. A day 3 running back, Kamani Vidal, and he's short, sort of like a short, stocky back. He's a hard-nosed runner. I think he could win over that coaching staff. I think he could get opportunity as the year goes along, and it might not require an injury to one of the other guys. It might just be that in practice and the opportunities he gets in games that he starts to outperform some of those veteran backs on that team. And then we can go back to everything that Tyler said earlier, the offensive line there and the coaching staff and the successful rushing attacks that Greg Roman's had in the past. So I'm looking at Kamani Vidal as somebody that you should be able to get. You probably had to take him in the last few rounds of your draft, but he is clearly out there in a lot of leagues. I'd be going out and picking him up, throwing him at the end of your bench. Let's see if he gets a chance in the first couple weeks here. And the other guy, another day 3 pick, Tyron Tracy Jr. on the Giants. And this is another one where you could look at him as a player that might not require an injury to a guy ahead of him in order to get opportunity this season. He kind of complements Devin Singletary very well in that Giants offense, right? Singletary, somebody that coaches love, somebody that can kind of do everything well, but nothing really great. And Brian Daboll has a history with Singletary, so we know early in the season it's going to be Singletary. But Tyron Tracy Jr., a former receiver in college, really only played one full season of running back, more of an explosive player, a guy that has that pass-catching profile that could get him opportunity alongside Singletary. And potentially, if he's successful with that, maybe we see him get more opportunity as the year goes along. And if the Giants fall to the playoff race, guess what? They're going to want to see what else they have in their lineup on their depth chart. They might give a guy like this a shot later in the season. So I think he's somebody that you want to get and stash right now before he gets that big opportunity, guys.
Who do people definitely want to know this when they're watching? Who would you say has a better chance of getting an opportunity, regardless of health of their running backs in front of them?
I would go with Tyron Tracy Jr. I think just because he has less guys to compete with in that backfield. Yep. And like I said, I think with the way Devin Singletary is, people kind of sour on Singletary, and I love him. I think he's underrated, but again, not somebody that has that really high ceiling where Tyron Tracy Jr., with the receiving ability, maybe he could give you a higher ceiling for fantasy, and maybe the coaching staff realizes that they need more weapons than just Malik Neighbors in that offense, right? So hopefully Tyron Tracy Jr. will get a chance to prove that this year. Now, maybe a little more controversial here. We're going to talk about two players that I think you can quit, and I'm trying to pick guys that are over 50% rostered for this section. And like I said earlier, we're looking at like single quarterback leagues, single tight end leagues. If you have like special scoring, that's a different story. But for this one, I normally don't take a second quarterback if it's just a one quarterback league. So somebody like Aaron Rodgers, I don't really see the ceiling for him at this stage in his career. I know he has the name, but what is he really going to be able to do? All I want to see from him is give me enough so that Garrett Wilson and Breece Hall and some of these other pieces in the Jets offense can have some ceiling outcomes. because Aaron Rodgers is not going to run that much at this phase of his career. So how would he get into the top 12 guys? It would require, he would need like 40 touchdown passes or something, right? And I'm not sure we're going to see that from Rodgers. He tends to slow his offenses down. He spends a lot of time at the line, which is great for the success of the team. But for fantasy, I would much rather have like the Colts offense, like Shane Steichen, who's going to run a ton of plays. We're going to get a lot of volume out of them. I'm not so sure we're going to see that from the Jets. So Aaron Rodgers, somebody that I don't think you need to roster unless it's a 2-quarterback or super flex league.
And to be clear, in those super flex leagues, of which I am a member, Rodgers still projects as like a higher end QB2.
I wouldn't necessarily say higher end, but there's sort of
QB2?
Mid-range to low end. There's sort of a really big tier there. From maybe say like quarterback 15 to like quarterback 22 or 23.
Yeah.
And he's right in there. And you were messaging me during your draft last night, not so much for advice, but just telling me who you had picked.
I was emotional support.
I was giving you like instant reaction, probably not always the instant reaction you wanted, because when you told me you took Rodgers, I was like, oh, I think you might have got better value later. And there were other guys available, Geno Smith, who I really like, but yeah, Rodgers is fine in one of those leagues as long as you're getting him at a good value and as long as you're not paying up to get him. You make sure he's going off the board, after the top 15 or top 17 or 18. Then I'm okay with it there. Now we got one more quit that I want to mention before we get out of here. Cole Kmet, somebody who I've talked about as a player that I've really liked in fantasy before, but one of the reasons for that was they didn't have many other options in that Bears offense. Now, totally different story. DJ Moore, Keenan Allen, Roma Dunze. They have DeAndre Swift in the backfield, and they have Gerald Everett at tight end. And Gerald Everett has a history with Shane Waldron, their offensive coordinator. So that is going to be a factor in the preseason. We saw this, that Kmet and Everett were out there, that he was sort of splitting reps, that they were both playing. That's going to be a problem for Cole Kmet. And he now becomes just a guy that's going to sort of be touchdown or bust, and maybe he'll be one of the sits in my column at some point, and maybe he'll score 2 touchdowns. But, he's a guy that I don't think you need to roster. And the fact that he is rostered right now in 62% of leagues, it seems kind of crazy to me. You don't need to hold a second tight end. Grab one of the early guys, and if you need to go to the waiver wire later, you can, but you don't need to have somebody like Cole Kmet. There are probably better options you could look to.
Right on. Booney, thanks so much. As always, great stuff. I got to say, I feel like regular season Boone, there's a little more pep in your step. I mean, don't get me wrong. You had a very peppy step previously, but now this is just like a different version.
Yeah, it's a super exciting time of year, right? I can't wait to actually see some real football on the field. And we know there's a lot of things that we're going to get right in week 1. There's also a lot of things we're going to find out we were wrong about, tons of surprises, and that's what's so exciting.
Yeah, man, that's why they play the games. Thanks so much, as always, Booney. And thank you so much for tuning in. Once again, that's Justin Boone. That's Tyler MacKillop. That's Sam Wilkins. My name is Jonah Birnbaum. Thanks for checking out this episode of No Timeouts. We'll see you next time.